Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast,
where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we're discussing, has Disney lost the magic?
Yeah, that is a topic of discussion, and I know we've kind of talked about that a little bit ourselves, about whether or not they are taking the right risks, if they're recycling too many ideas and things like that. So we're going to discuss that in this episode.
Yeah, it's a common question people have, and I think it's mostly centered around the theme parks, specifically Walt Disney World.
I mean, and price plays a factor in there as well.
And I think a lot of those points are valid, but has Disney really lost its way? I'm not sure. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But first, I want to cover the Disney news of the week. So Disney Cruise Line announced new fall 2025, spring 2026 itineraries. So these are a year and a half away. And a little plug for us, if you're interested in learning more about Disney Cruise Lines, we recap our first ever Disney cruise aboard the Wish. That was episode 294. That was a couple months ago. But what I found interesting, there's some interesting options here, some interesting itineraries. So they have a 13-night transatlantic voyage. It starts in England, ends at Port Canaveral, with stops in Spain and the Azores in Portugal, which are some good stops. I think the problem with this one, though, is it's 9 days at sea. So there's a couple cool stops, but you're basically at sea the whole time.
That's what I was going to say, is there's not a lot in the Atlantic between the United States and England. There's a little bit, but not a whole lot, and not places that people typically stop either.
So I think probably once you stop at the Azores, it's at sea the rest of the way. There's a 14-night cruise through the Panama Canal. I think that one goes from Texas and ends in San Diego. There's a couple 10-night cruises that go from Vancouver to Hawaii, and there's one that goes in reverse as well. These are all point-to-point cruises. And then there's some it's either 14 or 15 nights, but it goes from Honolulu to Sydney, or from Sydney to Honolulu. And there's stops in Fiji, American Samoa, and throughout the Hawaiian Islands.
Well, where do I sign up? That is the one I want to do, because the flight is fine from the United States to Australia. But if I could do it via Disney boat, and then on the way stop at islands that I will never ever see unless Disney takes me there, it's a done deal. I want to do it. And then, of course, you have to upend that with an Australia trip after that, and then you could fly back.
Well, it's interesting you add that, because on the itinerary, so again, these are a lot of point-to-point ones, and so I think what this is they're moving the ships around. Yeah. And so they're just basically, instead of just moving the ships around with nobody on them, it's like, hey, we'll sell this itinerary, we'll move it from Hawaii to Australia, and then they'll probably do some Australian cruises. Because really, there's only, like, if you look at these, there's only one option. Like, it's one date per cruise. It's not like what we did on the Disney Wish, where that happens all of the time. This is just happening once.
What is the date?
They're all, again, it's fall and spring of 25, 26. So I think this is a way for Disney to move the ships around. But it's interesting because at the bottom of this, they mention, hey, by the way, don't forget about Adventures by Disney.
I was going to say they're going to try to sell Adventures by Disney.
Because you're starting and ending in a completely different spot. So it's like, hey, while you're there and you're in a new place that you're maybe not familiar with, why not add on an Adventures by Disney escape, which they have them in Australia. They have them in
them
in London. They have them everywhere. So it's an interesting, kind of model of like, take a 2-week cruise. Then, oh, by the way, throw this on there, because you're just going to be in some random country nowhere near where you started from.
Well, it's a one-way trip, and most of the time people don't take one-way trips unless you're moving. This would be an interesting way to move. Like, what if you're like, I'm actually moving to Australia, let's just go that way.
You couldn't pack enough stuff though.
Yeah,
you'd have to ship it separately.
But I think that people who move like across continent, they have to do that. Like, they send their stuff and they box it up and they put it in, like, I'm guessing one of those pods, and then it goes across the ocean. If you've ever done that, let us know, exactly how that works. But you don't bring a lot of your stuff, so you're gonna be living out of your suitcase until it arrives anyway.
But I can't imagine there's a lot of people who would do this again, 10 nights, 14 nights, that does not end where you start. So I think that's why probably, again, they only have one of these, and I think it is probably a way of moving the ships, doing some cruises in that area, and kind of moving back.
So new plan. We have about 1 year to become independently wealthy so that we can get on that 2-week cruise to Australia.
If you're independently wealthy, why would you take a cruise? I would just go to these islands. It's pointless to take the cruise. I don't want to be on a cruise ship for 2 weeks.
I think it'd be fun.
No, I don't want to be at sea
That
that
would
long.
be a fun adventure.
It would not be fun. It would not be fun to just
Maybe
to spend
you'll see like Tahiti while
9
you're
days
away.
at sea across the Atlantic.
I would be all for it.
No. And then over at Disneyland, Disney announced that Haunted Mansion Holiday is coming back for Halloween season. So the Haunted Mansion's been closed since January. My guess is they never converted it back, and they just left all the Haunted Mansion Holiday stuff up.
Oh.
And that's why they're just going to bring it back for Halloween, which Halloween at Disneyland I think starts end of August. But they did announce that it will be with a virtual queue only, because what they're redoing there is the whole queue, so they don't have a lot of room for people. So it'll be a virtual queue because it's a very popular attraction.
Oh, it's amazing.
The holiday overlay there. So it will be back, but yeah, just kind of limited on how many people will be there.
We talked about this before on the show, but their holiday overlay of the Haunted Mansion is like equally good as the regular Haunted Mansion.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't miss and say, oh man, I missed the Haunted Mansion. Like if you go and you've had the opportunity to experience the Haunted Mansion, you know it, you love it, but you go and you experience the new, like the holiday one, and because you're maybe an East Coaster and you're not used to going to California, it is incredible. I feel like that's kind of, I feel like Oogie Boogie would be similar. Like I feel like Oogie Boogie Bash would be another one of those things that would be amazing. We haven't had the opportunity to go over there for that, but we have seen the Haunted Mansion, like the overlay, the holiday overlay, and it's incredible.
All right, so moving on to our main topic here this week is Disney losing the magic, and this is specifically Disney parks.
Bum, bum.
Excellent sound work there.
Thank you very much.
You do want to be a Foley artist. So this is like your audition.
Yeah. So anybody, know anything about Foley artistry and you want to hire me, I would love it.
And that was your audition. You can go
yes,
bum,
just
bum, bum.
just with my, and that's not even considering what I can do with like little objects.
I don't know that anybody can even hear that. Oh, is that mice running across the tile floor?
No, that's a higher pitch sound, but
okay.
That's just a sampling of something I can do with just an object that's around me.
Wow, imagine if you had a full studio.
Exactly. And lots of little things to play with. That would be pretty fun. I don't think I would ever be able to remember though, because I think you have to be actually brilliant to be a Foley artist, and I think that
you have to hear things just randomly and every day and be like, I'm going to file that away.
Like
I'm going to file that away. And then when somebody's like, hey, can you make this noise? You'd be like, yeah, if I take that one thing, mix it with another thing, add a little reverb to it, got it.
What would it be like? What could you use? I feel like a can, like popping a can of Pringles or something. Like I feel like that noise, like that noise.
Right. You can work on this, and we'll come up with a demo reel for your Foley artistry work, because we are getting way sidetracked here. We started talking about Disney parks losing the magic, and all of a sudden now you're thinking of everyday objects you can use for Foley artistry. We will get there though, but I think this comes because there's been a lot of talk recently, and I think it's specifically geared towards Walt Disney World, of Disney's losing the magic. Disney parks aren't the same. Disney's losing the magic, and it's been the past couple years. And I think there are valid reasons to bring this up. So if you look at Walt Disney World, we've had 2 failed nighttime shows with Enchantment and Harmonious. I think they kind of played those off as like, hey, they were just here for the 50th with Enchantment.
Yeah.
Harmonious was definitely like, they built those barges. They pulled those out. There was really no coming back from that. Haven't really gotten any new rides. And vacation planning has become more difficult than ever. You have Genie Plus now, Lightning Lanes, which Lightning Lanes are part of Genie Plus, but they're not part of Genie Plus. You have theme park reservations, which you had those for a while. You don't have those at Walt Disney World anymore, but they're still at Disneyland. And so it's like you need a PhD to take a Disney vacation. Plus, all of that stuff costs money. Like Genie Plus costs more than just the regular tickets, and FastPass was free. There's no Magical Express anymore. And so I think there are valid arguments, and I think all of this stuff has been adding up to, hey, Disney's losing something.
Yeah.
It's not the same anymore.
And now you don't even have to listen to the episode because you got 90% of it right there.
Yeah, but I will say, and I think laying that groundwork is that I don't necessarily think Disney is losing the magic. So I think all of those points are valid, but I think the issue is it's Walt Disney World. I think if you look at Disney parks as a whole, I don't think Disney's losing the magic. We've taken a couple of trips recently to Disneyland in California, and I think the magic is still fully there, and we will get to that. I think the international parks have it. I think there's a specific issue with Walt Disney World, and that's what we're going to get into here today of no, Disney's not losing the magic, and here's why.
I will add on here. I mean, I think that the concern there also extends beyond the parks. And for me, and I've been saying this for a while, I feel like Wish did not deliver. I wasn't impressed by the movie. I feel like at the box office, they've been not doing so well with Marvel movies. I don't think that they've really hit as much as they were consistent. Like, you used to know if you're going to see a Marvel movie, it's going to be great. And they've been definitely more hit or miss. I'm not saying that they're not enjoyable movies still, but they're not what they were. And then you look at the recycling of material as far as just all of these live action movies. And for me as a Disney fan that extends beyond the parks, and that really, like, I really look forward to any movie they put out. I'm concerned more about that almost than I am about the parks themselves, because I feel like creatively they are doing a little bit of treading water. And so, I'm worried, but I will say, Elemental, fantastic movie, and that is the past couple years. I mean, it's a year old.
That's last year. I mean, I want to touch on Wish really quick, because that's kind of what you started with. I would love to see, I don't think they're going to have it, but a documentary like they did on Frozen on the making of it. I don't think they're going to do that because it didn't do that well, but so I guess maybe like a Hollywood Reporter, like one of these like in-depth articles that where they interview the people that worked on it and talked about the behind the scenes, because I think a couple of things happened. I think there is a good movie. It was a decent movie. I think, let's say there's a better movie, because I think
it had a lot of potential, and I think that they must have left a lot on the cutting room floor where they would not. I think you've said this before. They would not have pushed that movie out if it wasn't the 100th movie.
That's what I was going to say. So, but real quick, and I want to say a better movie, because I do feel like oftentimes we as a collective society and fandom can be overly negative if something's not good. And I try to take a positive spin on things. And you might look at that as like, he's a
cop-out, but no.
He's just, this guy loves Disney. He's just trying to always be positive. But I'm always just so impressed that anybody can just make anything like that. To be able, everything that goes into making a film, making a Broadway show, making a song, making a nighttime spectacular. There's so much that goes into it. The fact that you can get a group of people to come together and even create anything, I think is an accomplishment that should be celebrated to a certain extent. Now, after that, you can be like, you didn't do a great job. You could have done X, Y, and Z better. So that's what I want to say. I think there's a better movie in there, because I don't want to completely put it down, because it's impressive that they make anything to begin with.
And I think that, I mean, the positives to be taken out of the movie, I do think that the music was pretty good. I don't think it was like Frozen 2 caliber or Lion King caliber, but I thought it was pretty good. They had some really good catchy songs. I loved Chris Pine's song, but and I also really liked the animation style. I know a lot of people didn't, but I thought it was interesting, and I was really happy to see that they tried something different as opposed to like resorting to something that they've already done.
Yeah, and I think just real quick, like you said, to my point of why I'd like to hear behind the scenes, because I do think there's a better movie in there, and I think a lot of it was they had to have it out for the 100th. And I think if they would have had more time, I think if they didn't have the 100th, they maybe would have scrapped it completely, or if they had more time, I think they could have done better. So I would like to see an in-depth thing on that. I mean, Pixar's interesting too, because they're going back to the model of, we need to have sequels that we know will bring people in, and then we're gonna have original movies. So the new plan that they've announced is they're gonna make 3 movies every 2 years, and every other movie is gonna be a sequel and then an original. So they're gonna alternate. And that's what Pixar did, 20 or 30 years ago when they were really at their prime. They would do Toy Story 2 and then Monsters Inc. And I know that's not maybe like the order it was in, but you had a proven movie, and then you had a new movie, and then that spawned a sequel, and then you had Finding Nemo, and you built off of it. So they're talking about, could we get an Incredibles 3? Could there be another Finding Nemo? And I think that will help them. It'll help change the narrative, at least, of the box office success, which will, I think, help them get some momentum about new properties like Elemental, that it's like, hey, you got to go see Pixar again. Pixar's on fire. Yeah, I didn't even mean to do that with Elemental.
I think that I actually didn't really know that. I wasn't aware that they said they were going to do that. I think that this means we're going to get an Up too. I feel like Up is ripe.
No good.
I feel like it's ripe for the picking. I think it's a property that they are really well known for. And so what I feel like Disney does a lot is they return to properties that people really enjoy. And I feel like Up has really like reverberated through all of like the Disney fandom.
I think the problem is they've had the series,
and
so it's like, what's the next story?
I mean, it's all about adventure. They can find a new adventure.
I think they can. But Incredibles is one they mentioned just because Incredibles 2 did over $1 billion. Finding Nemo, Finding Dory did really well. So I think they're going to focus on those properties first, but they are talking, it's going to be sequels to bring people in and then new ones to kind of seed the next, generation of movies. But that's a good point, because so much of what happens in the parks is driven by what happens in the movies and the IP. They have to have new IP because people go see Frozen. They love Frozen. You put Anna and Elsa in the parks, people will now want to go to the parks to see Anna and Elsa.
And they want to buy all of the new Anna and Elsa outfits.
Exactly. So it's a flywheel that builds on itself. So when, the movies aren't doing well, people aren't as interested in going to the parks, new rides, new attractions. There's not as much money that they're putting into it. So all of that stuff, being said, I think a couple things with Walt Disney World that is impacting this and is kind of creating this narrative. I think one of the things is the crowds. I mean, as little as probably 5 years ago, even 5-6 years ago, there were slow times. I mean, you talk to people, Disney people planning, it was go during the slow time. That's when there's less crowds. That's when you have the deals and you're going to have a much more enjoyable experience. And Disney made a very conscious effort to have dynamic pricing based on crowds, based on crowd levels. So the slow times were cheaper to incentivize more people to not go during the busy times, the slow times, because they wanted to even that out. And I get it, because operationally, if you don't want to have 1 million people one day and then 100,000 people the next day, because how do you staff that? Like I get why you want to smooth that out and you want to have 500,000 people every day. But they've done that extremely well, almost too well. To now the point is there is no slow season. There's only basically like crowded and like super crowded. And that definitely impacts your experience.
It definitely dampens it. And I think that, at the end of the episode, like spoiler alert, one of the things that I kind of just wanted to touch on is that it's twofold for me. And one of that is just the crowd levels that definitely make me feel like Disney maybe is losing a little bit of the magic. Disney World. I remember the first time we went to Disneyland, I thought it was exceptionally crowded. And I would say that the last couple times we've been to Disneyland, I was like, this seems normal. And I didn't feel like that. So and that's I think it's a smaller park. Mm-hmm. So like Disney World has been just so overcrowded. Now, again, we do tend to go at times where it is more crowded. We go to
race times, but again, it's basically busy all the time. And I think that's part of my point. And again, maybe making excuses for Disney. I mean, you can kind of come at me for that, but like it is more difficult to have great interactions with every single guest when there's so many of them all the time. Like we talk, like you mentioned Disneyland, you can have varying days because it's so much driven by locals. If it rains, not a lot of people go. It is not as crowded there in terms of like, if you look at the characters, they have roaming characters. You can't have that at Walt Disney World because there's so many people there. They would just mob those characters. And the fact that you can just walk up and just randomly, hey, there's Donald Duck. I'm going to go say hi to him. Hey, there's Ariel. Yeah, but even there's Ariel. I'm going to talk to her. Cruella de Vil's just walking around, and I can go have a conversation with her, and there's like 4 or 5 people there. you look at that much more differently, even if it's crowded and you're like, it's hot and whatever. You have a much more memorable experience because you have that one-on-one interaction, and you just can't have that because of the levels at Walt Disney World. They can't do that anymore.
Right.
And so that's why I think the crowds are a major issue, and definitely the price. I mean, that is a valid, gripe people have, that one, just everything costs more, and they do seem to be charging you for every additional experience. And basically, if you want to fight the crowds, pay us more money.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
And that's another problem there, is just that, okay, we built this new ride, but because the lines are going to be so bad for this line, you have to now learn a different kind of technology, and you have to learn how to go on to Disney Plus. Not Disney Plus, Genie Plus. You have to go on to Genie Plus. You have to make sure that you purchase it, and then you have to pay extra. I think the one day, what was it? I think it was, last time we were down there, it was Guardians of the Galaxy. What was it? It was like $50 or $25 a piece.
Well, Rise of the Resistance is, if you want to buy an individual Lightning Lane, it's $25. Cosmic Rewind's up there. Yeah. I think Tron, we ended up doing that because we wanted to ride Tron. That was only maybe like I think it was like $15. That was a little bit less. But yeah, but if it's like, hey, if you don't want to wait in this line, give us $20 or $30 and we'll make sure you get on.
And I remember looking at you and going, I know that, like, yeah, we could do that, and yeah, we could ride this ride, but I'd rather take that money and spend it on merch or keep that money as opposed to pay to extra on top of the ticket price to then ride a ride that I should be able to ride anyway because I paid to be here.
Right. And again, and you can, at least on Rise of the Resistance, they have a standby line. Tron, they don't have standby yet. Guardians of the Galaxy, they don't have standby yet. So you basically have to do virtual queue or pay. At least on Rise of the Resistance, you can say, hey, I don't want to pay the $25. I'll wait in the line. Now, it might be 2 or 3 hours, but you have that option, which is nice.
But I just hate having to do the what is my time worth math. And I think that's a stress point for me as a person going there because, again, I mean, you do all of the booking, but I know we pay a good amount to be there. And I know, again, we go often. So then if you're talking about your more average person, somebody going down to Disney.
We have the luxury of just saying, we'll get it next time.
Right.
We didn't get the virtual queue this time. I'm not going to pay. Like Tron, we wanted to. So we're like, we'll pay for it because Tron was a lot of fun. We wanted to ride it. But it was like, Guardians, we missed the queue. We'll get it next time.
Well, okay, so kind of like jumping a little bit ahead, and we've talked about this, but I had a family member call me the other day and sort of ask me about booking Disney World and how everything works, and that there's no more FastPass, and that's that, family member's last touch point with Disney, and things have changed so dramatically that they're kind of like looking to gain an education from us, knowing that we go a lot. And I had to really take a step back for a second and say, again, I say this a lot. I have the luxury of having you do a lot of the booking, but I also, I know a lot from doing this podcast, and I'm just like, this is crazy. Like, and I mean, it's not that other places don't have things like that. Like we went to Lake Tahoe several years back, and we realized that, like, oh, you can't just go to any beach at any time. The parking is crazy,
you
and
have to know,
people don't know that. I didn't know that going in. We ended up like parking in a spot you weren't supposed to park in because you couldn't get into the lot, but we wanted to go to a specific part of the lake. We didn't know that part of the lake is beautiful and the other part not so much. So like there is a learning curve to any place that you go, but I feel like it is really steep for Disney World. And so you almost like you have to book through a travel agent, and you have to talk to people, or at least listen to something where people know what to do, because there are ways to eke out the best, but I could see just going there and being like, this is my one trip and I hated it. And that breaks my heart because I love Disney so much.
Yeah, and I think that's what's happening. And again, most people are going to Walt Disney World. And so I think that's why you get this narrative of Disney parks losing the magic, because Walt Disney World is the most frequented one. And that's the one I feel like they almost give the least attention to. And I think part of it is they probably do give it less attention. I think the other issue is it's so big. We've talked about this before. There is just so much going on at Walt Disney World. It is its own city. When you have 4 parks, 2 water parks, 20 plus hotels, like you have to basically fund all these hotels, like you're a major hotel chain. How many restaurants do you have to have, all the logistics? Plus you're running theme parks, and water parks, Disney Springs, all of that sort of stuff. There's only so much money they're going to allocate to each of these parks. And then whenever you're trying to split that so many different ways, you can't put as much into it versus Disneyland. You have 2 parks. If you look at Paris, you have 2 parks. You have 2 parks in Tokyo. Like, they can, if you take $1 billion at each resort, it's going to go, if you look at, it's going to go twice as far if you just look at theme parks to Disneyland and Disney California Adventure than it is the 4 parks at Walt Disney World.
Right. And they have to do all of the little things, like they touch up the paint, to keep it bright and pretty looking because it fades in that Florida sun. And we've seen them touching up paint before when we've been there. So it's like, you have to kind of keep that in mind, kind of like you're saying, that they are making improvements, but they're not necessarily ones that you are going to pick up on, like, right. Unless you're there a lot and be like, that orange looks a little brighter this week, or you're seeing them doing it, like you're not gonna know. And then again, that all costs money, and right. So it's not going into rides or
you're not gonna see that. And I definitely think they need to figure something out in Walt Disney World. But I think the point we're trying to make, at least I'm trying to make in this episode, is that I think the magic's still there. I think people are just looking in the wrong spot. I think if you're just looking at Walt Disney World, you can't, there's a lot of evidence to say like Disney's slipping. But Disneyland is, I think, one of like the most special resorts Disney has. And even the international parks have a special magic,
a special je ne sais quoi.
They do. Like we've been to Tokyo and we've been to Paris, and both of those parks have something to them. And even and I want to say focus more maybe on Paris, because obviously Disney doesn't own the Tokyo resort, and it's sort of its own animal, and they put a ton of money so much money into that park. And over in Paris, those parks aren't that big. They have Disneyland Paris, which is basically Disneyland. They have the Studios Park, which is under a massive construction. I was under massive construction when we went. So, half the park is kind of closed or out of service. But even with that, there's a magic to it. And I think the fact that, again, there's only 2 parks at these things, it allows Disney to focus on it and want to get into some of these things where, Disneyland, like we talked about, the characters is one of them. There's just like added extras there that make it special and make it so much more memorable. And I feel like Disney has tried to replicate some of that at Walt Disney World, but I think they take the wrong aspects of it, or they do it poorly.
Speaking of replicating, that is one of my frustrations with Walt Disney World. So kind of, they haven't been, with Universal's announcements, being so close to Universal, they haven't really responded very much to that. They've talked about potentially upping their entertainment budget, which is awesome. Like, live entertainment is amazing. They need to do that more. But what they have announced is a little bit concerning, sort of, for me. Like, in Walt Disney World, they're talking about taking Dino Land and doing Indiana Jones and Encanto. Now, I'm going to leave Encanto out of this because I think they can do some really cool stuff with Encanto. I'm not sure what they're doing. But Indiana Jones, what are they doing? Are they going to copy and paste what is over in Disneyland? And that's what... and then I've also heard like rumors about Radiator Springs. Like, they're going to potentially...
I think part of the problem is, because they haven't said anything, it's just all rumors. And I think, they've thrown just so many Blue Sky stuff out there, because originally the Blue Sky concept was Moana in Animal Kingdom. It was Moana and Encanto. And now it seems like, it's going to be Encanto and potentially Indiana Jones. It's going to be Central South America themed. There was some talk I heard of in Magic Kingdom beyond Big Thunder Mountain bringing, not bringing Radiator Springs Racers, but bringing that like kind of ride system and doing something in a Big Thunder Mountain thing, like that would be themed to whatever they do there. Because there was talk of Encanto there too in Magic Kingdom. So I'm not sure, but I think your point was just like, they don't have a clear vision necessarily.
And it's the cut and paste nature of the beast. I feel like a lot of times when one park gets something that's successful. A lot of times they'll cut and paste it into Disney World because they feel like that has to be a park that has everything. But for me, one thing that makes the parks cool is that I do really enjoy the differences and the nuances between the parks. So I don't just want to copy and paste of what's over in Disneyland, like Radiator Springs, if they did that, or Indiana Jones. Like Dinosaurs, its own ride. And I know it's cheesy, but if you're going to touch it, make sure you're doing something special with it. Don't just give me what you have over in Disneyland, because it's not the same. Like it isn't the same. It's not going to be the same.
And I don't think that's the plan. I think again, what's happening is it's an easy way to convey a ride. So you have to look at it. Disney uses the same ride system in multiple different attractions. Like if you look at the Omni Mover, there's dozens of Omni Mover rides. So to say, they're going to put Haunted Mansion in another park doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be Haunted Mansion. It's going to be an Omni Mover. Now, Omni Mover is kind of, a lot of attractions do that, so people understand Omni Mover. But, if let's say Cosmic Rewind, that's a very unique ride system that people have. So it's easier to kind of say, hey, they're going to put a Cosmic Rewind ride in Disneyland, and people understand, I get what that means, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the exact same ride thing. So I think that's what they're saying with Radiator Springs Racers, is that's a very popular attraction just in the style of the racing and what they're doing, and it's going to be, let's bring that over here. Same with Indiana Jones. They're going to bring Indiana Jones, but I think it's going to be a different version. So I think that's kind of what that's coming from.
But don't they already sort of have that?
Well, Test Track is
very similar.
You don't have the race. I think people like there were rumors for a while that they were gonna get rid of Test Track and bring Radiator Springs Racers to Epcot, because people like Radiator Springs Racers much more than they like Test Track, because it's a better theme, it's a better IP. Story. It's racing, whereas like Test Track, it's like, I'm going in here, now I'm in a wind tunnel, now I'm checking my brakes, and then you just have one kind of quick straightaway. I mean, Radiator Springs Racers is a better version of Test Track.
Yeah, so I agree. What I'm saying though is, if you're we already kind of have that ride system, so I don't need another ride with that ride system. See, I would rather them take Test Track and convert that over, or do something with it.
I'm going to disagree with you on this, because I think what we've been talking about at Walt Disney World, of they only have so much money to spread out, and they need to be smarter about how they use it. Developing new ride systems is extremely expensive. That's why Cosmic Rewind costs so much money, even though it's a roller coaster, because they developed a new ride system. That's why Rise of the Resistance costs so much money, and it has downtime issues, because it's trying to make 4 different ride systems in one. So I almost think they need to start thinking more like this, of like, how can we just make get back to basics. Like Haunted Mansion is a great ride. It's an Omni Mover. It's a very basic ride system, but it's more about the theming and the design of the attraction and the story. And I think whenever they go and they do these new ride systems, like Cosmic Rewind, there's not much in that ride. It's a roller coaster, so you're obviously going through it quicker. But take a tried and true ride system, take a boat ride, take an Omni Mover, and focus on the theming. Like, get back to what Imagineering does best. Build a backstory. Build a ride, something that like intrigues people. You don't have to necessarily wow us and spend hundreds of millions of dollars developing something new. Build something people want to re-ride because it's a great story, it's a great IP. And you don't necessarily have to wow us with it, because that's what you need. You need more capacity with the crowds. Like you need to be able to spend money more efficiently, so you can continue to make all of the parks better.
I think maybe the argument that I want to make here is maybe that is not, and again, because it's all blue sky, and I think it kind of goes back to your point, they're so kind of cryptic about what they're going to be doing, that it kind of leads you, if you're not careful, like maybe I'm being a little bit right now, to jumping to conclusions. If it were up to me, the ride system that they need to replicate is what kind of Tokyo keeps doing. It's that trackless ride system. I love that trackless ride system. The Pooh's Honey Hunt, they have it in the Beauty and the Beast ride.
But if you look at the newest Fantasy Springs, they're boat rides.
Yeah, they have
they're boat rides. And again, they spent the money on animatronics, on the techniques, the technology. I mean, everybody is blown away by, if you haven't seen it, in the Frozen one where Anna's frozen and she thaws and her cape unthaws with her. And I mean, I've seen countless videos of everybody like, how are they doing this? It looks so perfect. And again, it's like they took a boat ride that is a cheaper ride system and they invested in the technology. There's talk with Encanto that it's basically going to be Mystic Manor, which is a highly popular attraction over in Hong Kong. And they're going to take that, and it's basically going to be
the house Madrigal.
The house alive. So again, it's taking
That's chills.
It's taking an existing ride system. It's saving some money, and then hopefully they can put that into theming and story, and give people a better experience on it. So I'm kind of okay with them doing that. I think you mentioned about like the copying and pasting thing. I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but I think one of the issues is when they are doing this, even they're copying the wrong thing. Like they're taking the wrong win from what the other parks are doing and porting it over to Walt Disney World. So if you look at Disneyland, for instance, like World of Color is an incredible show. It's a great nighttime show. Everybody loves it. And I kind of feel like they saw that and were like, okay, people love it because it's water screens. So let's just make bigger screens and have, bigger water screens and just do projections. And then we'll put that over in Epcot. And they had Harmonious. And it's like, yes, the water screens are important, but it's the story. It's the music. It's everything together.
And also the water screens over in Disneyland are right in front of you, whereas when they're in the center of the lagoon, even though they're massive and they block your view across the lagoon, they're still so far away because it's a huge lagoon.
Right. There's so much there. I mean, the other one is Mickey's Mix Magic, which doesn't always run all the time, but that is such a fun show at Disneyland. It's a quick show. It's like 10 minutes. It's full of awesome songs. Mm-hmm. It's Mickey's a DJ, so it's all like high energy, like pumping you up, just everybody dancing. So it gets everybody excited. It gets you going. Again, it's quick. It's in and it's out. And there's projections all along Main Street. Like that's the big thing about, at Disneyland, like they have the projection mapping.
Don't they do it on Small World sometimes too?
They do. Cause again, their castle's smaller. So it's like, you can't see those projections.
Locations for you.
So people line up and down Main Street for that show. And again, I feel like Disney World saw that and went, we need to put projections on Main Street. And when they did Enchantment, they made this huge deal that the castle's going to come alive and it's going to flow down Main Street and there's going to be this projection mapping. And there is no reason at all to be on Main Street because the projections add nothing to anything.
They're
and it's
more
terrible.
Like colors.
Yeah.
They're not, because in Mickey's Mix Magic, there are characters on the buildings. It kind of makes me think of like years ago.
And there's a story with Mickey's Mixed Magic. Like Enchantment, it wasn't something you could like easily connect to like you can with Happily Ever After.
So it makes me think of years ago whenever on the castle, they just sort of had like a really cool show where it was just a lot of the Disney like big hit songs and just like crisp pictures on the castle. Mickey's Mix Magic sort of reminds me of that. But again, it's on the buildings. And when they had Enchantment, it wasn't that. Like it wasn't that point where it's just like Disney's music is one of their high points. Like it is one of their selling points. It's one of the things that like you come back to. So a lot of people have that musical connection to Disney. So you want that on the buildings and they don't have it.
Right. Yeah. So I think my point is they're taking the wrong lessons from why this stuff is successful. I think the other thing we talked about was the characters. Just the character interactions are incredible. And even just in general, like the festivals they get at Disneyland, like Pixar Fest and everything, like they're so different where I feel like now at Epcot, basically every festival is exactly the same, just a different name. Some things are different. Whereas at Disneyland,
some things never change.
At Disneyland, they're very, very distinct festivals that get people really excited and they bring out special characters for them, special food. Like it is
characters that you never see too.
It is an experience to go to one of these festivals. Whereas I feel like at Epcot now, it's like, did you go for Food and Wine, Flower Garden? I don't know. They're all basically the same at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's the topiaries and things, and they
Right,
all
you have
have their
little
own
differences.
They
Yeah.
do have their own nuances, and I don't want to downplay that because it is a really cool feature. But you're right, like the variability isn't quite there. Whereas like they had the really cool Chinese New Year celebration. They brought out Mei Mei and her mom and like had all of this really cool merch tie-in and celebrated Chinese culture. And like that was a really cool thing. And not being, Chinese, I still wanted to go. Like I wanted to go and I wanted to take part in it and I wanted to feel what that was like. And Disney World doesn't do that. Like they do a really cool job of kind of almost tying in other cultures. And I know that that's kind of the point of Epcot, but it's like, okay, that is the point of Epcot. Why can't we bring that in here and replicate that? Because it gives it a cool new feel, and again gives you the opportunity to experience other cultures in the way that Epcot is sort of meant to do. But kind of going back and revisiting the point that you made about the characters roaming around, I think that another thing that, going back to that same point of the crowdedness, whenever you are in Disney World, you have to make like a point to go to see a character. And then that is going to be a big chunk out of your day because of the crowd. So it's like, all right, I want to go see Merida. Merida's a cool character. I want to go see her. Well, I'm going to wait a half an hour for Merida because that is how long the line is going to be at Disney.
Some of them are like, I mean, you want to see Mickey and Minnie or Hollywood Studios or like Olaf, it can be like 45 minutes to go see those characters. Yeah.
Right. And so, and like, sometimes you don't even realize what characters are there and what characters are available when like Disneyland, it just is so organic. My encounters over at Disneyland with Cruella de Vil gives me a completely different view of Cruella de Vil. Like for me, Cruella is a kind of a forgettable villain, but whenever you're at Disneyland and you see Cruella, like that's a character that you have to go check out because she's constantly saying really funny things. She always plays it very conceited, which is hilarious. And her interactions with people are always so great. And so it adds like that different layer to the character and sort of almost like improves that almost even the movie itself, because again, this is a chance encounter that you're having with that character that at Disney World, you'd have to make an effort to get to. And again, when it's a character like, for me at least, Cruella de Vil, where you're like, it's all right, I can miss that. You're missing out because you don't make that effort because you didn't know you missed out.
So I think all of this to say, Disney isn't losing the magic. It's just you got to go to Disneyland, or if you can, go to one of the international parks. Because I think if you are somebody that typically always goes to Walt Disney World and you are kind of like, I feel like it's not the same. I think going to Disneyland, especially, so let's just keep it in the U.S., it's like a breath of fresh air sometimes. I mean, even just the restaurants, I feel like are more casual and they're not rushing you through stuff. It's a much more laid back experience. It kind of does just feel like, hey, this is the Disney magic. This is, high customer service. I have a memorable moments all the time. Random magical things are just happening. The rides are plus. Like, everything just has a little bit extra to it at the parks. So I think the magic is alive and well.
Yeah, and sort of going back to, those chance encounters, the things that you might run into. Like, so again, you think of Disneyland having, this isn't a perfect place, but the Marvel Land, you're gonna encounter. You see, they have the Spider-Man show that runs 3 times a day, a couple times a day. And you have the Dora Milaje that come out and they go through. I mean, those are such like powerful experiences. And it makes me think again of what they were supposed to be doing at Galaxy's Edge. Now, again, they do stuff over at Disneyland. They get cool characters like Fennec Shand. They've had some of the little droids going around. And they had Hera and Chopper, and I don't think they were really quite doing that over at Disney World. And also, whenever they first proposed Galaxy's Edge, they had these elaborate shows that they did a few times on the buildings, and you're like, wow, this is going to be so amazing, kind of like what they did over at Marvel Land. And then they kind of took that stuff and they said, oh, you know what, maybe we'll put this in the Star Cruiser Hotel, which was amazing, and then they closed it, and then they never put that stuff in the parks.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a good point. In Disneyland's Galaxy's Edge, has characters that never come to Walt Disney World. So again, it's like, hey, this is successful in Disneyland, sorry, where you have Boba Fett, you have Chopper, you have the droids roaming around. Now I think the droids are there because it's Imagineering working on them, and they happen to be in California and not in Florida. But yeah, it's interesting of like, they don't bring those characters over to Walt Disney World. So I think all of this being said is really just like, is Disney losing the magic? No, you just have to go to Disneyland, or if you're able to, go to one of the international Disney parks, because the Disney magic is still there. And I think especially if you're somebody that goes to Walt Disney World a lot and you are feeling like it is losing something, if you go to Disneyland, just keeping it within the US, if you go to Disneyland, it's like a breath of fresh air because of all these additional things that they have, because the memorable moments and just kind of more sporadic, magical, random moments you have with the characters, or with some of the things they're doing is like plussings on the ride. And just, I feel like it's just a more like laid back, casual experience that I think kind of reconnects you with Disney. So I do think the Disney magic's still alive. It just happens to be in Disneyland, and I'm hopeful that Walt Disney World, we will start to see improvement on that as well. We'd love to hear what our listeners think about this though. Like, what do you think? Do you think it's gone completely? Do you agree, hey, it's still at Disneyland? Let us know on our Instagram at Enchanted Ears Podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, just comment below in the video. We'd love to hear from you. But that wraps up the show for this week. I want to thank everybody again for listening. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for lending us your ears.
Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you here next Monday.
Bye-bye.